Hello there! Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf.
I'm your host, Gold.
I'm your host, Connor.
And today, gentlemen, we are analysing and discussing Arc 7, Phase 7 of the ReZero web novel. I am so hyped for this.
Yeah, the shonen phase.
Yeah! Lots
this
of
is one
this phase.
This is one that, again, I've said this probably for like the last 2.5 episodes, but been waiting to talk about this ever since I read it, and there was no one else to mention it to yet. This is one of my favorite parts of the arc. Just all of the different parts of the battle, all in one major, war going on here, seeing everything come together. And it's paced so well. We get so many cool pieces of lore and details and information, new perspectives. More Todd, always great.
Yep.
And just hype moment after hype moment.
Yeah, this arc is very hype in a lot of ways. It's surprising how quickly things kind of go to it. Like, usually in the story there hasn't been this sort of decisive, like, okay, now let's get to the meat of it, right? In a sense, I think that's really smart, because you're right, Tappei has the necessity, and he can at times write really good moments that are small, but he would fixate on them way too much. Like, I could see like moments where he's like, okay, but I want to see what Garf feels before this battle, or I want to see what this character is doing to, unite this or that, right? And in this, it's not that like drawn out or deep. I think that is to his benefit.
It also really shows the improvement in Tappei's ability to write fight scenes.
Yes.
Like, comparing Garfield's fight in this one to compare to Kurgan, which is just as intense of an opponent, but just the way that the prose flows, that you can keep track of all of the action, it balances between going into either flashback, changing the scene, or step-by-step action of what the combatants are doing. It's all so much easier to follow and clean, and it's an epic fight. I cannot wait till this gets animated.
This will be like a crazy moment, right, if we ever see it animated.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, right, people have for a very long time talked about how, Arc 7 makes the series go off a weird place and in places that they don't like the story going. But I see this and I'm like, this arc, more so than any arc, deserves an anime adaptation, because it is so cinematic and bombastic, and so many different cool things are happening that require, I think, a lively depiction through somebody kind of directing it. I think Tappei got really good at writing these sort of stage directions, after, yes. I mean, maybe in a sense, after writing for all these animes, he's finally started to understand how to write fight scenes and choreography and stuff like that. I think that's probably true, because like around this time, I think, is when he started doing it,
Yeah, he's had a lot of time to practice, to learn, and he's just improving as a writer going forward as we continue him writing through the series. And it's really impressive to see that he's willing to learn and kind of get better in some of his own shortcomings, right? Because every writer has them. It's not like a negative to say to him is like, oh, you're a flawed person, because everyone's flawed. But the way he's working on some of the negatives of his writing is really impressive. Like, genuinely, I'm seeing a lot of progress in prose with these fight scenes, especially, as you say, Connor. It's night and day, my experience reading this, comparing to reading the fight with Garfield and Kurgan in Arc 5, because that was a slog to read. This, it flows quickly. I get all the information I need to know, but I'm not learning when Garfield is using the third finger on his left hand to tickle the hairs on the whiskers of his cheek. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, he just rips his stomach open, lets all the thorns out, and then transforms to get a new stomach. It's clear. Exactly what we need to know.
It's all the information I need to know. It's well written, very well paced, in my opinion. And the biggest thing I'll say here is the structure of this phase is really good. Like, the POVs we get for each chapter leading up to the parts of this phase, it feels right. It feels like it's in the right place. Like the moments we get with Roswell and with Otto, Garfield, and Amelia in what remains of the fortress city. Like, it feels like I'm getting the information I need, the information I want, and I'm learning some cool new stuff. Like, for instance, a big surprise of this phase for me is Hainel as a character.
Oh, yeah, Hainel's...
It continues to become better and better and better.
Yeah.
It's crazy how us doing this podcast and reading what we have for Hainel so far and what I have for Hainel going forward has made me completely look at him differently in the first episode of season 3 we just got.
Yes.
Of like, he's not He's being an ass, but he's not wrong.
I wish one of the things that's very interesting about the story is that once you get more of a character, you start understanding their perspective broader, right? Like I've always said that there's always like an issue, right? Like, for example, I remember when, with only like a limited amount of information about, like, say, Amelia's character, right? I spoke from a place of ignorance, being like, I don't really like the way that Tappei writes Amelia, right? Yeah. But more and more, he's gotten a lot better at understanding what type of character she is, or what her strengths are as a character, or like what she brings as heroic, right? Like what is it that makes her the apt heroine for the story, right? And like the same with any character. Like you put something like Hainel, and you're like, he's just sort of like there to make the rest of the Astrea family kind of look more sad and sorrowful, and lesser writers would leave it at that, right? They'd be like, okay, good, this character is there just to make this character angry, instead of considering his perspective, which is so fleshed out and amazing in this arc so far. It's like the times in which Subaru's anxiety kind of was the focus point. To think that Hainel of all characters gets that much perspective and empathy through like understanding his own flaws and whatnot, and the same struggles that the hero of the entire story, the protagonist, went through, and paralleling that is just so crazy.
It's crazy for me to think that out of all of the characters in the series, I never thought I would closely relate Subaru and Hainel to each other, like, at all. But some of their experiences are very similar. Some of their
the sleeping woman that he wants to save, like Rem. Yeah,
every single male character in the series is a different kind of foil to Subaru. It's just a fact of it.
Yeah, that's how it works. I mean, the thesis statement is Subaru, so every character is just supplemental.
Have a commentary on him.
Yes.
Right?
Well, at least it is true, but that's for this story. It's exclusively for all the men. Every single one is a reflection of a different part of Subaru to him, or is like a antithesis or a reverse reflection of him. Whereas, like, the women all have their own individual stories and can kind of rise above, and it's why they're seen as, like, the heroes and the more powerful people in this world super often, where all the men have to reflect Subaru's struggles. So with the exception of Reinhard, they all have to, like, be brought down, like, just one level from what the women here do.
Yeah, and I also think one of the interesting exceptions is somebody who's equal to Subaru, which is Otto. I think he's not so much a foil to Subaru as he is somebody on his level, and you kind of see it throughout this arc, especially the way characters talk about him, the way they kind of see him as a threat, the way that people are shocked by his presence. It makes it seem like the author is kind of like positioning him as the most healthy relationship that he can have. And of course Garfield as well, because Garfield is supposed to be the person that he's inspiring. Subaru is inspiring through his own manly thing, so that is sort of like the representation there.
It's just so cool that we've seen a lot of these male characters that had a positive or negative influence on how Subaru has made his personality going forward from the story. Like how he looks up to Wilhelm as his ultimate idea of what a hero is, right?
What a man is.
A man is. But in Subaru's ideal, I think the ultimate man is a hero, right? At least at this point, especially regarding how he feels about his dad.
Or is it a monster?
And in that sense, it's a really cool reflection to see that Subaru is that for Garfield of all characters. Like, this is my captain. This is the hero that I imagine when I think of hero. And it's great to see that reinforced even in the most recent episode of season 3, with just like some of the visual stuff you see Garfield do and how he replicates Subaru. It's just really satisfying to see all of these things tied together, feel like they're fully coming together. And I mean, just so many cool character interactions, just really, really interesting prose from some certain POV and narrations, which I think adds a lot of mystique to characters. Like Roswell, for instance, in this phase, I was loving his stuff. I learned new stuff about Roswell that I didn't know about before in this phase.
Yeah, we also get to finally be introduced to number one girl of Vollachian, Serena Dracaroy.
Yeah, we've heard so much about the High Countess, but we finally meet her in this phase.
I adore this woman so much.
It's very funny because, for example, it's one of those things where I'm like, after this arc, we definitely have to read some side stories, because it's like we're getting to the point where things are starting to overlap too heavily, where it's like this character is in like 2 side stories, and it's like, well, or EX novel or 3 EX novels.
Yeah,
it's their first time in the actual story. So it's like very funny.
It's actively referencing events in EX1, which we already kind of covered with Miles, but also in EX4 and 5 as well. Some pretty important stuff too, which the main story does introduce to a sufficient extent that if this gets adapted without adapting the EX novels, readers and viewers aren't going to miss anything. But you get so much more from reading through them. Like the whole story with this Valerie Temmelglyph person is huge and important, and is the major focus of one of the EX novels, and you can clearly see how much of an impact it has throughout this phase in particular. It's like Madeline's beloved is gone. This Flop's is someone that brother. Flop's brother, which makes a medium's brother. Serena's in this case like foster son, one of the 9 divine generals. It's an incredibly important person.
It feels like the shadow of his death is looming over Vollachian in a way.
I think he was the instigating factor in this entire thing.
Like the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand Day. It's like this is the moment that tips literally the scales from, because all of these things led up to it. That wasn't the single moment that caused this, but this was the inciting incident. This was the spark that started this chain of events. I guess so.
Overall
happy with this phase, because
I love this phase.
I love this phase. My favorite read so far of this arc. So many of the characters I love, and some of the new characters that I love. I think Tappei has found his ground really well in this arc. I think I understand what he's trying to do with this part of the story, and I'm so glad he made the decision to come to Vollachian to do it, genuinely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this entire frame of the story is so interesting and important, and it's so grand in scale, but also the themes are so succinct, right? And it's just about, is Subaru the hero, or should he relinquish? Like, what does it mean to be a hero, basically, and what does it mean to love somebody? We get
that's the thesis for Arc 7 is heroics, and like what that means between being a hero, a monster, a capital H hero, or like katakana hero, which is like that's kind of the difference. We'll get references to someone being a hero in Japanese, and then occasionally we'll switch to the katakana version, which is them using the English word hero.
Yes.
On occasion. So there is like a difference there, but that's, I think, the major thesis of 7. But you were saying about like love too, Gold.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Because everything with Yorna and, her power, but also, of course, with Rem and Subaru and Todd and I forget her name, sorry, off the top of my head. Yeah, Katya. And you get now Madeline and Belleroy. It's like, it's all about what does it mean to, where does the power come from? Like, one thing Vincent talks about in this arc, which I think he's wrong about, and he probably knows that he's wrong about, he says that, like, war is the natural state of all, humans, right? Mm-hmm. And, the thing is that Amelia, like, understands that, there is also a strength in love. We talked about this earlier, but obviously love is a reducing resource, right? It always spreads, it's a fire that lights the next fire, And in this arc, we see that very acutely. Like, what does it mean for the nation that it's supposed to be strength without love? What does it mean for it to find that balance? Because really, Vollachian heroes are the most monstrous people around, but they're also the strongest, right? Because of their, drive and ambition and goals, right? Their hatred, perhaps, sometimes. But like also there's an opportunity there in which, if I think Vincent sees this, if Vollachian finds it within their hearts to care about each other with that strength, they will become an unstoppable nation. And I think that's the reason why he's trying to do this gambit, because he knows that the culture is rotted to its core and needs to find a more accurate balance.
Do you know what? I have to completely agree with what you're saying here, specifically because, right, when I'm thinking of examples, if we're going to talk about like heroism and how love relates to it and how these two, I'd say, pretty integral themes the entire story are playing out for this arc, it's interesting to me that we get to see like an almost opposite side of what we see with Reinhard, where what's wrong with Reinhard is that he can only be a hero, right? All he can be is a hero, and that is what makes him a monster. A lot of these Vollachian heroes, like these divine generals, are monsters, and because they are so strong, that makes them a hero. We're seeing two extremes of heroism, but at the opposite of these two extremes, these people don't have love. Like, Olbart is a leader of a village, right? But he disregards them, disrespects them, clearly doesn't see them in a higher light. Arakea is a lonely, scared girl that has been turned into a tool and can only feel comfortable when someone is commanding her. Where do I go? Cecilius is basically
he's a fucking psychopath. He has no ability to feel love, exactly. I don't think.
No ability to feel love. Like, the list goes on of, like, these people are a showing of what is wrong with this world's ideas of heroism and strength.
Which is interesting that then leads up to Yorna as the last divine general, and her whole power is empowering her city with love to the point that they weren't able to enforce Vollachian culture and doctrine to within it because Yorna is too powerful to go against.
And the only notable person to have a true big rebellion against Vincent's rule, because I'm going to be honest, my idea is that I don't think Balleroy was truly rebelling against Abel.
You'll have to read the book for the context.
But that's the kind of understanding I'm having, right? So I feel like Yorna is a statement on her self-rebellion against that idea of culture, because she stands for the exact opposite of what Wallachia wants. But in a interesting dichotomy of these like themes, because she's so strong, she's able in Wallachia to fight against that, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just
such
an interesting setup for a place. And it's the perfect idea of a place that would foil not just Subaru, but also the Amelia camp. Because we see this with Otto in this phase in particular, right? Of like how a lot of the times he in his heart, or at least in his brain, of like logically thinking, a lot of the decisions Amelia makes, he's like, no, we have to be more ruthless here. But every single time that this happens in the story with Otto, he's always happy when his friends reprimand him and force him to go on the thorny, harder path, right?
Well, Otto exists as, like, not the contrarian, but I call it the 10th dentist myself. Like, the one who has to stand out and point out the other issues with the way that everyone else thinks.
Yes.
Because Otto is the only one who can sit down and think objectively about a lot of things. And it's why he's such a valuable resource to all of them. It's why he's able to kind of take command here. But even then, we see him wanting to be able to be up in the forefront, wanting to contribute more, even just physically, than he's really capable of doing. But I think it's also a really good foil for Garfield, who, in discussing the concept of monsters and heroes, he kind of defies the logic of it all.
Yeah.
Where, because he grew up with a very similar context to Kaufma, like there's a reason they're paired against each other. This isolated village, and then there's just this one kid whose power far surpasses everyone else there. But his whole people, his grandma, the other Ryuzus, the other villagers, the Amelia camp, they see him as just this amazing guy who's just doing better and getting stronger, even though he literally turns into a giant rampaging monster. But no one until Kaufma sees him that way. They just see him as a shield, a protector, which I think is kind of this third concept that you can throw into the monster-hero dichotomy and break it up, is this guardian, this protector, this shield of the Amelia camp going up and fighting against this major, major threat on his own and being the one who can take those hits and keep going because he knows that people need him to do it.
I guess. And if we're going to extend that thought further, then, if we're going to go beyond this dichotomy I've set up of like the extremes of heroism in this world, we could also, I guess, talk about in a way, right, when Subaru loops a lot and gains specific information and becomes like this terrifying force that you can't foresee coming, like Todd imagines him as, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't he also a monster in that sense, of that heroism sense of like, there's a thing that is inevitable, a thing that I cannot predict, a thing that I cannot overcome in a way.
He is. And he even mentioned like witch cultists that makes him terrifying. But I think the real connection to this role that Garfield can fill is Hainel in this case, of someone who does have to work hard, isn't like already broken beyond belief, and has to fight to the point where everyone else does think that he's a major force, that he is something to be reckoned with, and has to take all these extra hits. And I love so much that they're setting up this sort of pseudo father-son budding relationship between these two. I think it's so great.
It was one of those things I didn't know I needed it, but I did, you know?
And it makes sense in a way. If like this is piggybacking off of that. It makes sense in a way if these two become paired in that way. You know, these two outside forces who have to have learned their strength in a different way, right? Because if one is going to be a sword and one's going to be a shield, it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of, you know, balances out the scales of their own, you know, ambitions. Like, what do they have to get over all of them, right? And I think one of the things is that, you know, as you said, like, Garfield's thing is more shonen-y, right? In which it's not about emotions, you know. For example, it's partially about emotions, but we'll get to that in a second. I'm just saying that, like, Heinkel's entire thing is that he's already that strong, you know. He doesn't have to, you know, he doesn't have to train more. He's already trained enough, you know. He's lived a life swinging the sword, but he doesn't understand what it means to be a hero. Whereas Garfield has this sort of childish ambition, like a shonen hero, about getting stronger, you know, about protecting people. Because, you know, note that there's another thought. It's just, Garfield's not a knight like Subaru, he's a shield, right? He is kind of juxtaposed against everybody else's perception of strength as somebody who protects instead of somebody who fights. You know, he doesn't care about the traditional, you know, knighted title or anything like that. He just wants to be strong enough to protect the people that he cares about. Whether he has to beat people who are threatening them is just another part of that. And I think that is an answer to a lot of the concepts about heroism that people hold in such conflict, like even Heinkel, right? Heinkel's idea of heroism is somebody who's scary, somebody who's a monster, whereas Garfield's idea is somebody who loves and cares about people. I think that's something that Heinkel needs to learn from Garfield.
They also both have this concept about their strength coming from just getting back up and keep trying anyway.
Yes.
Because, like, Heinkel knows he's not the strongest, but as you said, he still trains every single day. And, like, that's the lesson that Schultz takes from him, for example. Like, that's the better way to do it. And we know that Garfield's ultimate goal is just to keep getting stronger. We know he does that obstacle course with Subaru, so he is still training himself. But what they also have in common is this concept related to their character of Reinhard as this barrier for them.
Yes,
where
exactly.
Heinkel didn't get the strength that Reinhard has and had to lose to him and has that hanging over his head. And Garfield thought he was strong, lost and faced Reinhard. Nothing happened. Like a very similar fight, it sounds like, where it just instantly was over. So I wonder if in the future Heinkel is going to help Garfield train even more to be able to match Reinhard, like use him as sort of a proxy to deal with his son at some point.
I could see that, actually. Yeah. I guess, because we're talking so in depth about this, maybe our focus statedly should be Garfield and Heinkel for this section, at least. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to start with Heinkel then, in regards, because I'm not going to lie, he's probably my favorite part of this phase, quite honestly. I love the Garfield stuff, but some of the emotional depth we get from Heinkel's POV narrations in these chapters is insane. Like, there's a particular moment where, and I wasn't expecting this, Zakir becomes a foil for Heinkel and rides in to come save the day, or at least sacrifice himself willingly, but in a very Zakir way to do it, right?
Oh yeah, that was so hype.
That was so hype. But it's a moment of big defeat for Heinkel, because he's on this battlefield, cutting down things, getting smacked around, and not knowing why he's there, cursing the fact that he swings a sword and he feels the weight of it in his hands, but it has no meaning to him. I had this immediate thought, because it's a very obvious thought, right? But he is the progeny of Theresia van Astrea and Wilhelm. So whilst he has that ability to hold the sword and swing it, he also has this feeling of being lost like Theresia does. Mm-hmm. And not knowing where he wants... What's the meaning of him swinging the sword? Because Theresia, she only swings the sword when she has to protect those she loves, right?
Right, which Heinkel doesn't have that opportunity to do right here.
Yeah.
And honestly, Theresia was probably the one that raised him. If Heinkel was, not Heinkel, Wilhelm was acting commander of the entire White Knights and the replacement for the Sword Saint.
Replacement for the Sword Saint, exactly. So the way I imagined it was he was getting like trained by Theresia in that sense of like what he would need to know, and then the height of his swordsmanship was kind of inspired by Wilhelm. So he in a way he's got both of them in his blade, right? But other characters in these chapters describe when he's swinging the sword, it looks like he's in pain. And that was such a good description of, like, I've never seen a character in a story where even just the way they fight is a showing of this deep hole within themselves emotionally, right? We get this moment with Garfield where he's talking to Hainel earlier in the phase and reprimanding him for his rude behavior, but then having empathy and pity for Hainel when he realizes the reason he drinks is because there's an emptiness in his eyes. Like, he's never seen someone with eyes so hollow and meaningless, right? Like, life is so pointless. And Hainel thinks about how he wants to die, but is afraid of death. And it's just a really cool, like, extension of all the themes so far we've seen of the Astrea family, and how he even, in a way, symbolically, is like a parallel to Wilhelm, of how for 15 years he was searching for the white whale to avenge Theresia before he could begin to try and think he could move on, right? And here, Hainel, he's been looking 10 years for the thing that he desires the most, which is Luana, which is his wife, right?
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me. It all fits into place, right? Why am I trying to impress Priscilla? I want possibly the dragon's blood, right? To restore my wife, because when my wife is back, everything can be better. You know, maybe I can be a family again. Maybe I can work towards getting rid of the divine protection of the Sword Saint. So, you know, I can have a family, and that's not a curse on my bloodline anymore. You know, maybe Reinhard could be free of it, and that's his ultimate goal. So many interesting things going on with Hainel this phase. What did you boys think overall of it?
For Hainel?
For Hainel, yeah.
Yeah. You know, I thought it was masterfully done, obviously. I mean, the juxtaposition between his, you know, anxiety and, like, what he's doing. There's very, like, subtle moments, too, in the struggles that he has, in which you can see that, you know, there's sort of, like, echoes of his childhood in which, you know, this teaching of being a noble knight and what it was all for from Wilhelm, you know, this idea that he had to remember, just don't think about what you have to do, right? And for him, Hainel, all he's been doing is thinking. And there's something, you know, careless about it, but there's also something that is reminiscent of an old thing that Subaru went through. Obviously, I'm talking about, like, you know, the Arc 4 Subaru, in which he was too wrapped up thinking about himself that he couldn't look to the people around him to affirm himself, you know? Like, this sort of self-pity, this sort of anxiety, this sort of self-loathing is all egotistical in the end. And it's something that you don't realize when you're swirling your head like that. But, like, if Hainel had just looked around him for people to help him, like, the very first moments he gets people like Schultz or people like Garfield who have, you know, no recollection of how he failed or messed up, he realizes how vapid his own self-loathing is, you know, how stuck he is, and that it's of his own doing, you know, that he is more than capable of, you know, carrying the sword and gripping it properly, but, you know, he can't will himself to slash up because there's barriers in his head, you know. In front of him will always be, instead of this aimless golem, you know, that's representative of how unfeeling and uncaring he's become about his own life. You know, he sees those golem as all of them can be, you know, Reinhard in his mind, you know, an unreachable...
Or himself here.
Or himself, yeah.
Just a mindless fighter who's just swinging because they're told to, not really for anything that they really want.
Yeah, and at that point, it kind of makes you think about, you know, how he's lived his entire life with these expectations on him. I wonder at one point if he thought he was going to be the next Sword Saint.
Oh,
you
he
know?
definitely did.
Yeah.
Sure.
He realizes that, you know, the thing that he actually cared about, his wife, was taken from him. And he doesn't even know why, probably. And that's, like, he doesn't know the exact details why, obviously, but I mean, like, especially with the memories being messed up, there was probably a whole bunch of things that he can't know about.
Well, so for a bit of clarification on that, she has Sleeping Beauty syndrome, which is what they compare the gluttony effect to. So they still
Right.
are aware of who she is, but it's like what happened to her and around that's fuzzy, which it just screams Pandora, but that's
Yeah,
a whole other
exactly.
thing.
I mean, that's the thing. It's always going to be a synarchbishop's meddling, right? Or a authorities meddling, I think. The Sleeping Beauty disease, to me, always just seems like, oh, these doctors don't know what this is. And it's because it's something inexplicable.
It's the same as how I feel like the disease that killed the royal family was probably something to do with Capella's blood, right?
Yeah, I agree somewhat with that, yeah. At least the same authority of lust, probably.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think like his not knowing like where he's fighting is something that we're going to figure out for him in this phase. And we talked about his juxtaposition of becoming strong. I guess we'll talk about a bit about Reinhard and his sort of. I think there's obviously a lot to say about Reinhard in terms of his. I think I talked about it last podcast, in which I have this assumption that he is in the same way puppeteered like Ceaseless is, and that's why he's a monster on level of Ceaseless, because he sees himself as only at the whim of fate, right? When Hainel will truly surpass Reinhard is not when he'll surpass him physically, it's when he'll finally find a fate for himself that he chooses.
Yes.
And I think we're on the path for that.
In a similar way, in the vein of how, and I remember I said this last podcast, but I'll reinforce it again. In a similar way of like the self-made man that his ancestor Reed was. And I feel there's a lot of comparisons you can make between Reed and Hainel in the potty mouth and the slaying of dragons, all of these things that just allude to this idea that Hainel needs to forge his own path with his sword and find out what his sword means to him.
I have a new. Sorry, I was gonna say I have a. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to say I have a new theory, just real quick. I think that Heinkel's going to slay Mezeria like his ancestors in that case.
Oh, do you know what? I would like that. And in extension to that, I wonder if they have knowledge of Reed's sword technique that we see in Arc 6 that we don't see anyone else use yet. Do you reckon
the stick swinging technique?
The stick swinging technique. Do you think there's knowledge of that in the Astrea library, and maybe a part of Heinkel's character, like where he gained power, is him learning that technique for himself?
I don't know, but on the thought of him kind of inheriting this from Reed, it's an interesting point that Hainel literally carries his family name with him. Like he has the Astrea sword instead of the dragon sword, which I think does lead credence to him being a more proper descendant of Reed in that regard.
Because that is in the sense of, because the thing for Reed is that he didn't have the divine protection of the Sword Saint, right? Like
or any specifically magical sword.
Yeah.
It was
his whole thing was fighting
strength.
it's just himself.
And that's something that I want to touch on real quick too, is the fact that I think I just realized this. There is a almost tragic perversion of what the hero that was Reed has been transformed into by the observers. If the observers gave the blessing of the Sword Saint to everybody after Reed successfully kind of built up the strength to be named that hero, everybody else in their family line has only been a hero through the designs of fate rather than the designs of themselves.
Yes.
So they, in essence, they aren't a real hero. It's only inherited heroism. Well, it's
that's
not actually. Yeah.
That leads up to, though, Theresia being surpassed by Wilhelm, who did the same thing. And then,
yes, exactly.
So Hainel here is at that point the son of someone who did the same thing and is much more similar to Reed, who did the same thing. So it's possible that while he might not be able to do this himself, he could lead someone else to the thought of, like, there is, sure, like a ridiculous amount of strength that monsters like Kaufma Irelux, Cecilius, Reinhard have, but that doesn't compare to like the human will and ability to just continue improving yourself.
Exactly, because I think a lesson, I mean, we see it, I know this is a silly comparison, but this is going to make sense, trust me. Even with like Subaru's radio calisthenics that he does every day, in that sense of you making the effort to better yourself every day as a person, in terms of your own physical capabilities, in terms of what you can mentally do, is the fundamental example of the human spirit. Being imperfect, but always striving towards being as perfect as you can be. And Reinhard is a bastardization of that, as is the concept of the Sword Saint. I mean, in that sense of, Reinhard is the ultimate, like, exemplification of that, right? That idea of the bastardization of heroism, of the human will. And that's why Subaru is a foil to Reinhard, because Subaru is someone that defies fate, whilst Reinhard thinks he must inevitably follow it.
Yeah, and that's why Reinhard's also a foil to the isekai trope of somebody going into a world and gaining that strength just by being resurrected in it. You know,
Yes.
It's this idea that that's not actually heroism. Why would you want to read a story in which somebody is hero only through inherited power? It's like, this is not something that they earned, you know? And I think that's one of the more overarching, even if it might be at this point so extrapolated far out, I think that was the genesis of this concept, you know?
And it, on that line of thinking, right, it's a thing of, I think this is why feudalism is a perfect setting for the kingdom, and why the meritoric imperialism of Wallachia is a really interesting contrast point, why it makes sense for this world to have that degree of technology, because that can also be a commentary on that too, of the inherited power, the inherited political influence, where that comes from. I mean, Roswell is an example of this in himself, right? Of like, he's built up this power and this knowledge over these generations of himself that he's inherited from himself, and that is a bastardization of life itself too, right? Like,
yeah, it really is.
And Tappei cooks, I think is...
Yeah. And that's why Reinhard is not living a real life. That's why Cecilus is not living a real life, is because they're both at the whims of the puppets and that they think is, you know...
But it's also why Reinhard is allying himself with the one who wants to tear down the current system.
Because that's why he's going to be a real human once he goes through this revolution with Felt, but not now.
In the same way as Hainel tells him back in Arc 5, you know, that's too convenient. You'll never truly make up that way. I don't know if that's, whilst I understand why he does that to seek freedom, is that really the way he's going to gain freedom?
I mean, sure. For that, to me, I think he is just right that the rift between Wilhelm and Reinhard is too massive to just approach it by being kind and extending that open hand.
And not talking about the things that came before, right?
Yes, the elephant in the room for that needs to be addressed. And while, like, flipping the daisuke-yaki, sure, that's a fine way to start that conversation. Hainel has to know better than anyone that they aren't going to discuss Teresia there. Yeah. And the moment Teresia comes up, it causes another huge rift between them again.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I think that moment will happen where Wilhelm says, you can't even swing the sword without it. Can you, thief? Right? I still think there's still hatred there that can't be overlooked by just simple, posturing.
In specifically from what we know of Wilhelm's character, I wonder if a little bit of that resentment also comes from a self-hatred of maybe never being able to find a way to lift the Sword Saint blessing off Teresia, and by extension Reinhard, because in a way that was the reason. That's the reason Teresia died ultimately, is because she was the Sword Saint, and she had that moment where she had to go out while Wilhelm was busy doing this other thing, right? And Wilhelm in that moment may be thinking, I couldn't save her, and because of that I couldn't save you. I think there's a bit of self-hatred there too, is what I will say.
Well, he also lashed out at an 8-year-old child over this shit.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So like he should hate himself for that. That's kind of, it's ridiculous of the way that he and Hainel reacted to this. But it is ultimately, it's not unrealistic, something that can be forgiven.
And something interesting about the character of Wilhelm beforehand is that he talked about it in the latest episode of the anime too, which should give you an idea of when we recorded this. Like, the idea is that he said, back then I only thought about swinging the sword. This is probably the reason why, for example, he wasn't as articulate as he is now. He's wise now. He's grown into a wise old man. But back in the day, before Teresia died, I think he probably didn't know how to speak or relate to almost anybody. He wasn't a noble guy. He was just a guy like, his ancestor Reed, who just swung the sword,
like Hainel,
right?
just swung the sword.
Yeah, and that's the reason why Hainel, is so confused, and that's part of the rift of it too. I honestly don't think Wilhelm was a good father. I think he was
not at all.
Oh no,
I think
he was terrible.
an asshole. Yeah, I think that's a thing that we see in the
It's like
flashbacks.
generational trauma, right? Like he
Yeah.
doesn't teach him the lessons he himself learned, so it just continues.
His regret is that he can't speak to his own family the way that he can talk to Subaru because there's that existing boundary. He knows that he's messed up and wants it to be better, but it's in the way. And I think Hainel has to be the one to mend that gap between everyone.
Yeah, he's going to be the one that ultimately brings the Astrea family back together, right?
Yeah, because he's even between the two of them. He's only one step removed from the trauma rather than Wilhelm is 2 steps. And, it's uneven if, for example, your grandfather tries to apologize for making your father turn out so bad and then making you turn out so bad. It has to be the median in between who has to make up both those relationships because he's the closest to them,
He's also in the middle in that he was able to understand both Reinhard and Wilhelm's reactions to when Reinhard cut down Teresia.
He understood that both were valid in their own way.
And that neither was going to be able to understand the other.
Yeah.
So, he has his potential, and as much as it sucks that he just gets one shot by Meguro
I think it makes sense.
towards the end of this phase, nothing else is going to happen because he has this unstoppable wall in front of him.
Because the wall in front of Hainel is himself. We've talked a lot about Hainel for a long time. So
onto Garfield now.
He deserves it. Hainel is going to turn out to be the best character by the end of the story.
Oh my god, I believe it. I think he's in my top 5.
We need to have a good dad figure because we don't have one yet. Wilhelm can serve as a grandfather.
He's a grandfather, yeah. Exactly.
Roswell existed as the bad dad figure. He was literally foil to Kenichi in season 2 you need to turn out just like me, turn out like yourself.
2. Yeah.
But Hainel is about improving oneself ultimately, and that needs to happen. I fully expect that he will eventually join the Amelia camp. And that he's going to be their Astrea.
I think it also have a close relationship with Subaru. I think because Subaru and Hainel have this similar, very similar experiences, very similar feelings about their father and their mother. In a weird way, they probably do have very similar feelings about their mother in particular and their father.
Because we think about it, Teresia is like... It's interesting because in that way, Subaru sees Wilhelm as his dad. In a lot of the weird, airheaded ways, Teresia was like his mother, you know? So in that case, they're like weird soul siblings in a sense.
Yeah. It's like it's a connection that goes beyond words at that point, right? And I think it'd be really interesting to see these two interact more, maybe build a relationship of some kind, and be that as a showing of what Hainel needs to do to step forward with his family's healing, right?
Right.
But we're going to move on to Garfield, but Hainel is amazing. I can't believe I'm saying this from what I believed of him in Arc 5, but I love him. He's one of my favourite characters in the series. He's definitely in my top 5 along with Subaru Foria at the moment. I'm loving every single scrap I can get of him. But
slowly, Subaru is moving out of the top 5, which is an astonishing thing for the series to have accomplished.
Yeah.
But yes, let's move on to Garfield, who was my personal favorite part of this phase. I love everything about his fight with Kaufma. It is a perfect battle, start to finish, in my eyes.
Would you like to talk about why you feel that way, I guess? We'll start from that point of view.
Well, yes. So it really shows the difference between, for one, what both sides are fighting for, while not being a case of explicit good versus explicit evil, like his battles with an undead zombie or a literal vampire. This is another person. Someone else who is isolated, had to grow up and embrace this idea of I need to be the strongest one around, to be this monster, or shield for the people around me. Although Kaufma's origin is a little bit more tragic and messed up, considering he has what I'm guessing is a literal alien parasite inside of him.
That's the kind of vibe I'm getting, yeah.
Because this world doesn't have the concept of an ocean anymore. So their abyss, the only one that we've mentioned so far, Olbart talked about that as the sky. So like if the abyss is like the abyss of the Starry Night, for example, if these bugs are from
Are they
the
from the
abyss,
stars?
is this like a meteorite or something else that's fallen down, like a literal fallen star again, that all these like genuine xenomorph aliens are inside of?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, that's
who would ever have made that connection of aliens inside meteors?
Yeah, I wonder. It's a interesting thought, huh? But Kafma having embraced this and showing like all this will and determination, and I think it's important that he's not a divine general for that
Yes.
purpose, because it
He's in a
shows that he
similar
is
position.
similar position, yes, to Garfield, in that he is like one step removed from the leader of the forces.
But also, and we see this, I think, in the previous phase with Kathma, and we could show this with Garfield saving Kathma at the end of their fight. They are one step away from monsterhood, because whilst they are monsters in that traditional sense of power and strength and what they can do, they are, at the end of the day, I would say, good people, right?
Yes, and they're both willing to go that extra step, but they're doing it not out of forced obligation or this warped sense of duty, but out of a genuine desire to protect what they care about.
Yeah.
Like, Hoffma doesn't know he's working for a fake emperor. He thinks he's working for the most intelligent and devoted emperor that Wallachia has ever had.
He's thinking, because in the end of the day, his devotion is real. It's not like, oh, this is my duty. This is devotion of, this is the man that's going to make my country better, that's going to lead us to the right path.
Yeah. If he knew that Abel was on the other side, I'm positive that he would have switched.
Yeah.
And he is doing everything he can to try and end this fight, just to call it over. But Garfield gets to bring out this new energy to him, almost to the point where he's enjoying the battle and getting to see just how much he can really do and what he's really capable of. And we get to see Garfield do the same thing, of go further than we've ever seen him fight before. And it's just an escalating effort of, I have this power, here's my attack, here's the response, and then a counter, and then a response and a counter. And it just keeps building up and building up and building up until Garfield goes absolutely insane and rips himself open because he knows he's going to be able to transform and replace the flesh there,
And
as well
also
as eating
swallow a
literal
fire gem.
fire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is to burn out the insects that Kathma has thrown into, which is the most badass thing to happen in this series yet. Can I just state, factually, objectively, that was fucking crazy.
It's so cool.
But it's one of those things where it's so cool that the characters in the story come out of this fight both satisfied, even though one has lost and one has won, because they fought to their hardest extent and they respected each other as opponents, right? Because Kathma, whilst he's disappointed he's lost, he's satisfied by having this fight. Like, this fight meant something to him.
This is also the only fight in this kind of war scene that we're getting where it goes back to the original theme that we talked about in phase 1 of arc 7, of that this arc in particular is less about going against monsters or the witches cult or like just a literal monster of the mobbies like arc 2. But this was people versus people of just differing viewpoints. So Heinkel's battle is like giant golems and a metal man. Amelia is fighting a dragon. Everyone else is like, Otto is having to wield these other powers and manipulate everything. But shoot, I lost it. Garfield is fighting against just a person, another man, and they are having to throw themselves into it. And it encapsulates the fight that we're doing here, that neither of them are in the wrong. And that's why this fight can resolve well, unlike Heinkel, who gets knocked back. It feels like a tragic, horrible defeat there.
And it also, in that sense, I think it's, people, you could say this generically about a lot of stories that talk on the subject of conflict and war at its heart in a truly human and empathetic understanding like Tappei does in this. But now more than ever, I think we need stories that talk about this, about how a lot of the time on opposing sides of conflict, it's not evil versus good or evil versus evil. It's complicated people, human beings with their own motivations and understandings of the world in conflict with one another.
Yeah, and that's what ties back to like Amelia's point to counter Abel of war is not the default state. It's like Garfield and Kaufma both just want to help the people and the things that they care about. And so their default state at the end when the fight is over is peace. It's not like immediately thinking of how does the next fight progress? Like, how am I going to get revenge?
It's fighting for peace. It's the same for Todd, even. Todd hates warmongering. We see this in his one of the POVs we see from him of, I hate you warmongering people, right?
Yeah, but he's also the biggest warmonger in this case.
Yeah,
he never takes the peaceful approach.
He's a hypocrite.
I have a lot to say on Todd's issues later in this episode.
As well.
I just want to get the hype of Garfield resolved here.
Yeah.
Like the last part that I really enjoyed from this is we already knew Garfield has this huge respect for Subaru, right?
Yes.
But this time we get to see that he shares a similar respect and a really close relationship with Otto too.
Yeah.
And get that in that he's doing this because he knows Otto is expecting him to do it and believes that he's able to.
And that's why he has to push through, because it's for his bro.
Exactly. His literal brother. He calls him that a couple times. His older brother here. Not just like my guy, bro.
Yeah. Older brother.
Because he's not had, apart from Subaru and Otto, he's not had a big brother figure in his life before, right?
Nope.
No. And, you know, something interesting about this is that I think, as you were saying earlier, it's like these people were the two that were treated like monsters their entire lives, but they actually have the most heroism of any of them because they both have ideals that they actually feel for. It's the reason why in this battle, they both feel this sense of, felicity, this joy, right? Like they're enjoying fighting because they both know that despite the fact that they might disagree with each other, that they both know that their opponent is somebody who is a true, in their eyes, monster, because they've only seen each other as monsters their entire life. But like, in a way, that's the core of heroism that's being answered here.
Yeah.
You know?
But they're also seeing each other in the fight. A lot of times, Garfield's shields get like compared to a bug's carapace, like Kaufman would recognize.
There's a it's not a familial bond, but there's almost a brotherhood they establish in this fight. Like, I would not be surprised if we ever see Kathma flip sides, which I would imagine he would do if he knew the truth, of Garfield and Kathma being two people that would work very well together and build a very good friendship together. I could see that very well. And I think that the possibility of that even happening because Garfield makes the decision to save his life is a part of the themes of the story, right? Because we'll talk more on Amelia later, but there's a thing Amelia says in this phase, which I think like directly is speaking about the themes of this story, where she says, I'm actually going to get the direct quote up.
To beat them up till they can't fight anymore? Or is that Otto?
Amelia's narration says, "Life is very precious and cannot be compared to anything else. So, if life could be compared, it would be with another life." Amelia is just directly stating that true human nature, as she says in opposition to Abel, is not war, it is love. And if there's anything that causes conflict, it's people's love for one another. And the exceptions to that are actual monsters. Like Olbart, for instance. He's not fighting because he loves something, like he loves his village, or he has someone dearly that he's like fighting for. Olbart fights for himself and for a sick, twisted desire that's not rooted in love, right?
Oh boy, here I go killing again.
Yeah, oh boy, here, gonna kill a small child again. There's this small young lad, I'm gonna fuck him up. I'm gonna sneak up on him with...
Don't cross this line or I'll kill everyone.
Yeah, I'll kill everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
He makes do on his promise.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing with Todd, too. It's
exactly.
He also has this sort of vacuum... Like, something interesting is that these people position themselves as heroes because they're fighting for a goal of theirs, right? But in reality, heroism comes from, in acting in violence, the only justification is if you're doing it with violence, with love,
Yes.
Like that, like you need to have something that dampens or offsets the harm that you're doing, right?
Because in that sense of, you can't like condemn someone as an eternal sinner for defending those they love. Because how does anyone truly be a good person? From that moral understanding of black and white, right?
Yeah, of course.
Which is why, I guess, the true pacifism Subaru was trying to show in this arc has been foiled early on, right? Because that's not the answer.
You have to fight for those you love. And if you don't, then do you actually love them?
Yeah, exactly. You have to fight for peace. And if that means you have to go to war, you have to make sure, one, that's the last resort, obviously, and violence is the last resort in every situation. But
that's a good transition, though, because we can see that taken to an extreme of killing for the idea of the one you love, which we see Todd doing here.
Oh, okay. Let's talk about Todd now, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So
first off, just real quick as the initial part of this, did you think that the Ishmael Cyclops chapter opening was funny?
Yes.
Where we get like this whole rundown of this whole thing, and then it's just over in the blink of an eye.
I think it was funny because when I've experienced other media like this before, at least in the example of this scene in particular, where, we get this guy's backstory and he's got this really cool and unique power that could be really helpful. You're like, he's going to be an important member of the story, and then Todd just kills him and his people off.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was a trolly comedic subtext moment from Tappei.
Yeah, I guess we can touch on this real quick. I think it's very interesting, all the demi-human races they introduced offhandedly here.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, they're obviously not the focus of this, but like it does kind of broaden out the world even more. The fact that there's, Cyclops, centaurs, these metalkin, these weapon people. Yeah. Like that steel folk,
mm-hmm.
That's what I meant, yeah. And it's like that sort of thing demands more, you know what I mean? When you write something like that in there, you're like, well, we're gonna get to this eventually. I think Cyclops was a good, and it's like the evil eye thing, I think, obviously. They're this ocular power, right? And yeah, I think it's kind of cute because it kind of hints more at it, and it touches on it lightly with Ublik in this
yes,
where he burned off his own evil eye, like stuff like that. Obviously supposed to. It's interesting how Tappei layers these things, because you're right. It is like a goofy, silly moment that's supposed to be like a what's it called, like a subversion, right?
Yeah.
But like I think what he does with it is also slightly layers in some world building about like things that exist in the world that you wouldn't have known initially. You get to learn about it, and then also at the same time it's kind of funny because it's also frightening because obviously Todd, but
because we get some cool well-built-in details, like these centaurs, for instance. They don't use bows and arrows, they throw javelins with the power of like fully mana infused like strength and just rain it upon the walls, which start to crack them, by the way, which is crazy. And like how these glow people with like these gems in their heads, they get more powerful the more people they kill, apparently. They absorb their souls. Like, Tappei, give me more of this shit, man. Come on.
Yeah, I really like this chapter. I remember reading it and thinking, like, okay, is this like a new
main character,
like main threat, like a third faction that's getting involved here as their own rebellion? Because we do see that there's a bunch of kind of fake what does he call himself? Natsuki Schwartz running around.
Which is why I assume he's there. But yeah.
And then we also get to end this with him seeing Todd as a coward, like this weak, non-combatant force, and recognizing the fact that he's still here and fighting what he is as the biggest terror on the battlefield.
Because he immediately recognizes, I have to kill this guy now because I see this color of his intent, but he's doing this. Like, I have to kill him now and
he's just annihilated.
Yeah.
Which is such a good intro to Todd, this phase, because it not only does that, but we then immediately get a huge character point for Todd that's almost overlooked of his ableism here, which is important considering his like major relationship of thinking, I can't believe someone with only one eye could fight that well.
Even though his fiance is someone who is disabled.
Yeah, exactly. Which
yeah. It also says the thing with Jamal where he makes fun of Jamal. Like, you see the true viciousness and hatred in his heart. Like, there's almost no love. Like, even though he purports to do this out of love, you can see that actually what he truly feels in these like cruel moments that he shows is nothing but contempt for other people. It's like there is nothing that he loves about other people. He thinks them as weak and measly reflections of himself.
And it makes sense then that as we see Katya get introduced in this phase, right? That she is she mentions things about how she's a throwaway for this fiance of hers, right? Or and how despondent she is about her brother dying in battlefield and how she hates war and these things. It truly shows you that Todd is not fighting for his fiancée. He is fighting for the object of his fiancée. Right?
Yeah, he's molding and brainwashing her into being the person that, oh, this is another thing, right? Like this idea that, Subaru once had a reason to be a hero, which is somebody that he loved, but he realized, like Roswell said, that you shouldn't be the person to force your ideals upon the woman that you love.
Yes.
This sort of thing. And we see, obviously, Todd is exactly that person. He's the person who would do anything to make somebody think that they're weak. Maybe the reason why, he thinks so perfectly about this relationship is because she's so dependent on him.
Yes, exactly. So that was the point I was going to make here. And we've done like this comparison from Todd to Subaru, this arc, a lot. But this is almost the apex of it to me. Because when we first meet Todd and like we're introduced to him working with Subaru and allowing Subaru and Rem and Louis into the camp, and he's super friendly with Subaru this time only. And we finally get to see now that his relationship is with someone who, just like Rem was at the beginning, cannot walk and is entirely dependent on him. But with Subaru, his main goal was allowing Rem to grow and recover and wanting to be her hero, yes, but also not forcing the idea of the Rem he has on there. He was sad that she was gone, but he wasn't ever saying, oh, you should be like hugging and adoring all over me. And he was letting Provincial Rem be Provincial Rem.
And the topic of ableism too, he was never like devaluing her because she wasn't able to do this one thing physically. He was always
he never made fun
of
of her.
She was, or how she's learning things quickly again on the fly when he was going through her traps. Like,
right,
he just gave everything that he could to support her.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you think about amnesia, it really is, like in the real sense, it would be a condition. It would be something that's, something that you have to think about, right? Another thing is the fact that Subaru was in the perfect position to mold Rem into the Rem that he wanted.
Yes.
But he realized the folly in doing that quickly. Like, he realized that he shouldn't say these things. He realized that was hurting her. And he had enough empathy to recognize that wasn't the right way of going about it. I think that instinct was there initially, and I think that's an important part because anybody has a touch of that sort of selfishness inside them. Subaru initially tried super hard to get Rem to remember the love that he had for her, right?
Yeah.
And in that is the juxtaposition which, Todd doesn't even have a flicker of a good person inside of him. That is the reason why he's true evil. It's because he never once thinks or regrets his actions. Only the time that he regrets his actions is when he feels like he's been belittled,
Or that he's fucked up.
Or yeah, well, that's the reason, right? Him getting fucked up is him thinking that he was weak for the first time.
Yeah, he was checkmated for the first time.
Yeah, it's a purely selfish feeling. It's like, oh, I'm lesser than this person. It's not, oh, I messed up, I hurt this person.
Okay.
It's, yeah.
As O'Connor was saying about the hypocrisy of calling everyone else the ultimate warmongers, or I hate warmongers. You are the poster child of war, motherfucker. Like, I'm sorry, if there was anyone I would call the winds of war, it would not be Abel, it would be Todd.
And we see that right from his introduction, because his mission is supposed to be get the Shudrak into the Imperial fold, where as soon as he learns where they are, his goal is not get them into the Imperial fold and talk to them. It's stop them from becoming an enemy.
Yeah, dispose of them, whether by making them not an enemy or by killing them so they don't become an enemy.
Exactly. And the thing is, right, this isn't even the directive of the Empire. It's only to make it so it's less convenient for him.
Yes.
He's like, I don't want this to become a big war. I have to end this now. Like, at any cost, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter who I kill or who I hurt. In the same way, that's the juxtaposition of heroism in this, is that he's the true monster in the story. He's the monster they're actually talking about.
The actual evil. Yeah.
Yes, when Kafma is talking about, oh, I'm a monster because of what I've been ostracized with, or Garfield feels like a monster because he's such a huge threat, like this thing, or Kafma sees Garfield
sees him as a monster.
Yeah. And the real thing is that people don't recognize the true core of evil that exists within the hearts of somebody like Todd, in which he does not care about the lives that he ends. He does not care about, doing it for somebody else. He is only taking the most convenient route to his own self-interest. Like, there's nothing else to him. There's nothing else for him. Everybody else is just pawns in his own story.
And I've mentioned before in previous podcasts how Todd very much is a sociopath, right? And it kind of in a way it's speaking to me in the sense of Tappei has done a very good job of characterizing someone like that, because in everything Todd does, he is a sociopath, right? Like, he is someone that has no interest apart from self-interest, right? And that's what makes him terrifying for me, because those people exist in our world, right? Like, that is a very real concept in this world and in that world. There are people like that. There are people that aren't human in the way we understand the spirit of humanity to be, right? Mm-hmm. And that's terrifying. That's a terrifying idea. I'll mention two things off what you guys have said here, because I think apart from that, this talk on Todd has been great. Apart from the fact I'd mentioned, his stuff with Otto and Petra and hunting them down was terrifying. And as soon as I heard that he was going to go deal with the people behind this battle, I was shitting myself, because I was like, no, Otto, Petra, stay safe, please.
Yes, it's exactly what he would do here, is go and take out the actual threat, because he knows that this is not something that a bunch of monstrous, overpowered individuals are going to be coming up with themselves. Exactly. It's going to be someone like him, which is an interesting comparison, that he thinks he can foil himself with Otto. You don't get that, right? Otto is too good to be compared to you.
Exactly. My God. How dare you?
Exactly.
And it's on the topic of ableism and disability, I think it's really cool that Tappei is addressing this in a way, because a lot of how Japanese society sees disability, right? Mm-hmm. In that it's a weakness, or perhaps it's like a showing of shame, or a showing of something you don't need to talk about. And I like the idea that Tappei has made his ultimate bad guy someone that treats someone as with a disability as lesser. I like that. I like what Tappei is saying with that.
And
go ahead, Gold.
I was going to say, and it's interesting because it's like, I think one thing that we kind of see is that, for example, Otto's entire thing is that, like, you know, Todd trying to foil himself with Otto is because he wants to, he sees himself as somebody who Otto is, in which Otto is actually a gentle soul who hears everybody else out, but is innocent in ability, you know.
His whole thing is communication, is his ability to communicate with people. And
Todd thinks that he's able to, you know, put the wall over everyone's eyes, right? He's able to pretend to be this, like, cunning, impetuous person who is in reality just doing it because, I just want I want peace. I want just a simple life with my wife, with my fiance, and that's all I want. And he wants people to pity him. He wants people to see himself as weak. And he wants people to see that he is actually the most innocent of all people, right? Where Otto just lives a life where he actually cares about everybody around him. And in a way, that sort of, it's hard to say, because it's like the way in which somebody cares about what other people think of you, Otto's ability is that's his superpower. He knows at all times what other people thinks about him.
Yeah.
And that makes him the perfect strategist, in the same way that Todd is the perfect strategist, where Todd's thing is built out of like sociopathy. It's like, I have to control everybody around me. Otto's is, I have to listen to everybody around me.
Yes, exactly. It's literally an exact showing of true, beautiful, innocent empathy versus the blackness of unfeeling, right?
Mm-hmm. Which makes it all the more terrifying that he is hunting down our two most, aside from Amelia, the two most innocent people in the Amelia camp.
I am so scared. I'm so scared, guys. Like, no, I don't, it's not even just a thing of like, I'm scared for their lives. I don't want Todd to meet them. I don't want Petra to see a person like Todd. I don't want Otto to see a person like Todd. They don't deserve to deal with someone of this caliber, right?
No, but I mean, honestly, well, it might not seem like it immediately. Otto has got some physical power to him. Like, he's not the weakest person in the world.
I mean in the sense of, like, these good people, these people that are considered the non-combatants, because they're not necessarily weak. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that Todd is someone that will trample on someone because they are in the way, or because he views them as lesser or because it's convenient to do so. But Otto and Petra like exemplify people that just because they may be like in a lower position of power doesn't mean they don't have value. And Todd is the antithesis to that idea. But one last thing I'll mention: Todd as a character makes the chapter from Arc 6, Murder Becomes a Habit, hit so much harder for me when I realized that chapter is in a way talking about the beginnings of what a person like Todd is, someone where murder does become the habit.
Where they have to resort to it once, and then it just becomes the easiest solution.
I did not realize Tappei had perfectly set that up in that chapter for Todd. And it makes sense why that's a chapter in Arc 6 and why Todd comes in the next arc after.
I think we actually mentioned that before in the phase where he is taking every possible way to murder Subaru.
Yeah.
In Guarl.
Right. It's interesting. I mean, one thing that I also want to mention is the fact that I definitely now believe that Subaru's going to kill Todd, right? Obviously, there's too much juxtaposition between that. Now that I think about it, literally, Rem was in a wheelchair for Arc 6, and now Katya is in a wheelchair. And
he was also like unable to walk for like half of Arc 7. She was in a basket on Subaru's back.
Oh, right. You're right. I forgot about that. You're right.
A huge chunk of time.
Yes.
Which is why that comparison exists, because Subaru has this super healthy view on the struggles that Rem faces and wants to be there to support her and let her recover and grow on his own. Where, who knows, maybe Katya's injury could have been something that may have been healed. She mentions that there's a bunch of other healers, or Meline mentions there's a bunch of other healers in the capital.
I could see Todd being the one that, like, it could be a thing of like it's a natural thing from birth, but if it was like an injury that caused this disability, I could see Todd being someone that would orchestrate that so he could have more control over her. That's the kind of thing Todd would do.
Yeah, I agree. I also
do you really want to work so hard to teach your body how to walk again? I can just push you around. It'll be totally fine.
I trust me, completely rely your entire being and person upon me because I know the way.
Learning to walk is actually too hard for you, and I don't think you're able to do it. So just stay there, you know. And I also think like one of the things about Todd is that like I think he's definitely going to get killed by Subaru by the end of this. But in the way that we're talking about, it's interesting because it feels like Subaru.
I lost you there, Gold.
Oh, sorry, we lost you there for a bit.
Oh, sorry. What did you last thing you heard me say?
You definitely think Subaru is going to be the one to kill Todd, and you think. Yeah.
Because I think that like the Synarch bishops were originally like these pure evil creatures that Subaru allowed himself to kill. I think in that way, Todd is also pure evil, so it's perfectly justified. I also think that there's an interesting thing that Amelia said in this arc that kind of makes it still one of those things where it's still going to be difficult for him because Amelia, said that there's always humanity in people that people don't see, right? I think we're going to get one glimpse of humanity of Todd by the end of this, right? And it's going to be in an impermissible way. Maybe Subaru sees it, maybe he doesn't, but Subaru still has to kill him. I think that's going to be something. I
think it would be most impactful if it's Todd's afraid to die and he's vocal about it.
Yeah, that's probably
that would hit Subaru the most, right? That's the experience that makes Subaru, in a sense, inhuman, as we say, as it said at the end of Arc 6. Like, why is Subaru a monster? Because his understanding of death is different from every other mortal being in this world.
Yeah. But
it is right now. He's just as scared of death normally. It's just in his immature form he's turned into this monster.
That's a thing I'm talking on the themes of that. But I think it would make most sense if Subaru is about to kill Todd, and the moment of humanity we see from Todd is the desire to live. Like, I don't want to die. Like, maybe he's crying or like screaming like, no, I don't want to die. That's going to be the thing that sticks with Subaru forever.
Yeah. I also think that, as we're talking about people who are monstrous because they can't die, characters like Yorna and Roswell are, in the story now, and now we know that they can't actually die in that sense. Because of that, and Al's here as well, right?
Yeah.
And because of that, it's like his monstrousness, Subaru, is going to be juxtaposed between all of them. We see like opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Where, Subaru's in this sort of like good side, but like in the middle of that good because he still struggles with normal stuff. Yorna's in the purely good side. Roswell's in the sort of evil side, sort of good side, and then we have Al, who's probably all the way at the end of that in terms of the uncaring nature.
in that list as well because of his divine protection.
But there's no human feeling to that tin.
It's like there's almost a scale of love on that as well.
Yes.
Where like Subaru and Yorna's resurrections are sourced from a place of love. Where Roswell's is done out of a love, but also obsession.
A twisted love.
A twisted love, yes. Well, I think honestly, Roswell A. Mathers had genuine love, but it's become warped over time.
Twisted and warped. It's become inhuman.
Where going all the way to Reinhardt's and Al's, where it's done mechanically and it just feels cold.
Like a video game.
Yeah. Where Al's is done and it feels painful, and then Reinhardt's just feels cheap. Like death is meaningless.
Because it literally is meaningless because he can acquire the divine protection of the Phoenix, which is something he should only have once whenever he wants.
Mm-hmm. He just gets it back.
I think one of the things is that Tappei is trying to say that people can do monstrous things, but the only time that it makes them a monster is if they don't have somebody there that they actually care. That the reason why they become a monster is more important than their actions, right? It could look monstrous to you, but you have to see that. For example, in Subaru's case, there's somebody who loves him so much, and that's the reason why he loves everybody else in his camp. That's why he restarts over and over. We see Yorna, who is born out of a love from this King of Thorns, right? And how she loves everybody else, and that makes her this very pure existence. And even though she's doing this monstrous thing, this thing that goes against the rules of the world, in a sense, it's, just as pure as anybody else's, life. And then we see, Roswell, who's doing this nefarious act that is sort of like, sort of slightly taboo and stuff like this, out of the love of just one person that he has an obsession over. And then at the very end, they don't even have anybody at all, both Al and Reinhard. They do this.
We don't think they have anyone. Al still will use it for other people at the very least.
If it's turned out that Al has Pandora is actually the one orchestrating this, then I'll be like, cinema. And it's like, he talks to Pandora. Yeah, and maybe that's something that we don't know because Pandora erases the memories of people around him, that Al is seeing Pandora and she's talking to Al. And
that's how his authority actually works. He summons Pandora and she overwrites all of his deaths.
Right.
And then makes him forget that she's there.
So it's not even that he has an authority.
It's just asking for her help. Who knows?
Because she summoned her isekai sage, right? And this is the thing she wants.
Yep, Al is not dead, and it just says that over and over and over again.
I like that as a theory. That's not a bad idea.
I'm being ridiculous. I'm saying like he's literally summoning her like a Pokemon, like next to him, and she's just making him forget. But
all Pandora has to say,
story.
all Pandora, imagine like a flashback thing, and this is just me being stupid, right? Imagine like a flashback thing where it's like she's been here this entire time. Pandora's been in every scene in the series that's been around Al. And she just says, "You don't know that I'm here." And then that's all she needs to say.
I've often wondered if, for one, if she is the taboo and it's like you aren't able to talk about this, if that's part of it, or if there's going to be a point in the time where we do get a flashback and she was there, like in a scene that we've already witnessed and we just didn't know.
Maybe she summoned Satella to Subaru's side.
I'm sure of a crazy idea. Is the reason why Satella loves Subaru because Pandora made it so?
I don't think so. It didn't seem like she couldn't change people's minds.
That's true.
Because otherwise she would have manipulated Amelia.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't change the human heart, I don't think. I think that's the thing.
She could change.
She had to manipulate Goose into a traumatic event and indulging in the sin in order to change him.
She can't directly say that, anybody's character's changed. Just like she can't change the character details of what people are. She can only manipulate the events that they undergo.
Yeah, that's what.
But we're getting off topic.
Yeah, we're getting off topic. But you wanted to start with Iris, right?
Yes. So speaking of characters coming back from death and talking on Yorna, or as we now know her, Sandra Benedict and Iris, as well as probably several other people, because she's been avataring around for a while.
Crazy.
So this is the missing piece of information from one of our previous episodes talking about like the soul and the ode that you were missing, Wolf.
Yeah, and it now makes so much sense to me, and I now that piece of the puzzle has like opened an entire picture for me. Like
first off, well done on predicting her being Priscilla's mother.
Yep.
Like, good on you for that one.
Also, I just want to lay this up here, and I know this might be controversial, but hottest mother and daughter combo of all time, perhaps?
That's a pretty based opinion.
I was joking about it being controversial. It's pretty obvious.
It's objective.
Yeah, at least in this story so far. Things might change.
Yeah, you know.
That's crazy.
Who knows? There could be greater heights to reach. I don't know.
Well, would you count Serena and Medium as mother-daughter combo?
I don't know. Would I? I mean, I know what you mean. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we need to. I need to get more Serena to understand.
Yeah, I need more Serena on that though.
Yeah. But yeah, sorry. We're talking about Iris. Interesting. I mean, this entire thing about the King of Thorns myth was first mentioned back in Arc 5. Arc 5, and it was mentioned by Sirius to Priscilla, and Sirius seemed to recognize this ability that Priscilla had, and noted it was the same as Iris in the King of Thorns. And Priscilla recognized this, so it seems like Priscilla already knew that her mother was Iris. And
well, she wasn't surprised that she soul hopped into someone else.
Yes, exactly. But yeah, that sort of revelation gives you a lot more context, obviously, about a lot of the themes of the story, and also basically like it's interesting to think about because this is the third. I mean, we talked about this, but just now, but just like Roswell, she has this ability to swap bodies, right?
On the topic of Roswell, she is his ultimate foil. But yeah,
exactly. That's what I was about to say. I was about to say, in the same way that Roswell can swap bodies, she does it probably unconsciously. It's probably forced.
Yes,
right? But
it's like a curse of. It's not the curse of Thorn.
Reincarnation.
They say commandment in the web novel of Thorns, but it got translated to something else in the light novel because that word means something else.
Yeah, obviously, and also like one of the things is that people throughout history probably like sees that, like in context now, they probably see this king as cursing her, but really it's a form of love, like Satella to, Subaru in that sense, being able to be reborn, but it's less, immediate. Obviously you're literally born into another body. So it's probably kind of traumatizing. I mean, it's the Rudiest story of like, from Mushoku Tensei, where you're born in an infant body and have to, with the mind.
I don't know if it's in an infant body though, because Yorna is still older than Priscilla here, like physically. She's a fully grown woman, and Priscilla's like barely.
Yeah, now that you think about it, but then again, Kitsune are a bit weird, right? So this might be a thing about that race.
But the demi-humans in this world are still aging at normal human rates, with the exception of elves, because Garfield and Mimi are still like considered adults at 15.
That would be weird, because at that point the only way that would make sense is either one of three things, right? One of two things, I'll just say, right? One is that she inhabits an empty shell of a body, or three, she just creates a new body at the same time.
That was the assumption that I was going with, is that after she dies, she just has a new body that she's in.
Yeah, but then it's weird that it's different, right? Like, why would it be...
Because her ode is gone.
Because, Because
the same soul, different ode.
It's not the soul, it's the ode. The blueprint for the shape of the body is different.
Yeah, but when the ode is born, it would presumably be as a child, right? It would be a baby, wouldn't it?
Well, Echidna was able to shape ode into different forms.
True, but
she wished to.
We're then presuming that when she dies, she can then shape the ode of her next vessel, which is crazy. That is beyond Subaru's power of Return by Death, almost. It's like you can control who you reincarnate as. It's like, that's
I don't know
crazy.
if she can control it. It might be like a more random effect. Like it's just an ode gets given to her. But because she has like this adult soul, it manifests around her differently because the soul is connected to the ode in that regard. But it's a little unclear for how that goes.
My assumption is it's actually a malfunction on the part of Ode Lagana.
Well, it's in defiance of Ode.
But that's what I mean.
Right.
But this is what I mean. Like, so in this sense of because she is the ultimate defiance to Ode Lagana, but she's still within its bounds, even though because Subaru's mechanism is outside the bounds of Odlagana's understanding, right? But Yorna's is, in the sense that she still has Ode for each of these bodies, and she still has a soul. So my idea is, because it's interacting and denying Odlagana's ability to retrieve her soul, what's happening is it's malfunctioning, and each time she dies, Odlagana is giving her new Ode, as it would for a new being in this world. But it's
the observers are probably pissed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But then because of this, it's malfunctioning, and because the Ode is connected to the soul, and she has the soul of a 400-year-old person at this point, plus, she is having adult bodies each time she's born anew.
Yeah, and I'm not thinking that perhaps Priscilla Benedict, the other Sandra Benedict, was a more innocent woman. So maybe it was the shape of her soul at the time, right? Like, maybe she still had a bit of an innocent love for, just, I'm going to try to live a normal life, right? But then she, met the Emperor, still has this love for the Emperor, as we talked about this before, had Priscilla. Then when she died the next time, maybe she decided, I need to come back as a more forceful person.
Well,
she's still, hasn't she made proposals to Vincent several times as well?
Yes.
Yeah. But that's the idea. She still has that
obsession with the Emperor, because as she's speaking, we see from her POV when she's talking to Abel, and he refers to her as Iris, which is a badass moment, by the way. But she thinks about how the man that is related to the man that she loved is talking to her in a way that is making her think and feel about him. And it's very explicit that the reason she pursues the Emperor isn't for the power, like a lot of people assume. It's because she's pursuing the one she loves, that she lost. And that's why she wants to die and break this cycle anew, and that's why Abel is offering a way to break that curse, because she wants to die and presumably, in her idea, go to an afterlife with her lover, right?
Yeah, that's the idea for all of it.
But I still think Yorna still has a lot of responsibility to the people that she cares about.
Yeah, but this is how she's opposite to Roswell, in the sense of she's had this situation unwillingly, but she still chooses to love those around her. She still chooses to build strong communities. She still chooses to be a mother to these people. She still chooses to be a protector to these people. Roswell gave up every single thing about his humanity for this one single purpose, this stake he has sharpened himself into. Yorna has been put in difficult circumstances, but despite that, is still ultimately and beautifully a very human and wonderful person, full of love and capability to love others. Even though she has an ultimate goal she wants to reach, she's not willing to sacrifice people for it. And that's very admirable and a really good showing of her character. The more I read of Yorna, the more I love her. She's just great.
She's incredible.
And Priscilla's
very lucky to have her as a mom.
Yes, this is also a thing of like their relationship in these chapters itself. I feel so bad for Yorna. Like when she realizes Priska? Huh? And drops her Kisaru? That's a big moment, right? Like,
she's got to be under the assumption that she's dead.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's a thing of Abel then tells her, your ultimate goal now isn't this curse, it's protecting the daughter you once lost.
Yeah.
Because a 9-head brain of Abel to have left Priscilla alive during the Imperial selection.
That's what he was thinking, right? Exactly.
It's true. It's
definitely. 100%. It's not just because Abel is secretly a nice guy. Yeah.
Yeah. But also,
it can be both.
It's a both at the same time, obviously. Because the perfect guise of it is going to be, why did you leave this person alive? Well, obviously, it's because I had a logical reason to do it.
Had to manipulate Iris, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Amelia calls him a klutz in this phase, right? And I think the way she's saying is like he's a tsundere, almost. Like, oh, you're a bit klutzy, aren't you, Abel? You don't really wear your true motivations on your sleeve. Like, you have one reason to do these things, but that's never the thing that's most important that you're wearing to you. I mean, because he even thinks about in his narration that his life does not matter in his overall plans for what he wants for Wallachia.
Yeah, I mean, he said that it wasn't necessarily like that wouldn't be ideal, but it wouldn't be the plan, that it wouldn't mean that his plan would fail. His ideals go beyond his life.
Which speaks to him not being an arrogant man or a selfish man, right?
I think he's still a little arrogant.
Well, yes, but not in the unreachable, conceited way. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's arrogance in self-assuredness, just like Priscilla. They are siblings.
Right.
Yeah.
and just what I was about to say, I was like, the thing without, it closes even more tragic picture. And I still we still haven't connected all the pieces yet in terms of Priscilla's backstory. And I mean, of course, there's next novel that'll help fill in a lot of that gaps. But there's a thing that I still want to kind of posit is just like, without Yorna, Priscilla has grown this personality. That's my opinion, right?
Yeah.
Without Irish, I should say, right? But it's the same thing. And, like, in that stead, she had to grow more into the callous nature of, a Vollachian princess. But at the same time, I think she's always had the love for her mother with her, even physically or not, right? Because of the power that she has inherited from her.
That's their connection, right?
And she's used it to do the same things that Yorna has done, but with a different attitude, obviously. I think that's a cool thing that shows her strength as a person, because Priscilla, there's things where she says, like, you're all part of the play, you're all my possession, all this stuff, but like there's still a core to her that makes me think that no matter what happens, she's already secure enough that she doesn't need to do much more growing, because she will always have that love with her in every one of her actions.
It's all about love. Everything it comes back.
Arc 7, love.
Yeah. it should be called what's it, Land of Wolves or whatever. It's just love. We see so many different familial relations in this arc in particular that I realize, like, loads of different like adopted or foster brotherhoods and actual familial relations and relationships. It just, Tappei is cooking with this arc, man. I'm so glad he decided to do this.
So before we move on to kind of like the last major thing with Amelia and Meline here,
yes,
I just want to cover like a few little pieces. We already briefly mentioned Otto, but I mean, kudos to him for really expanding his power and like feeling guilty that he's asking others to like literally shed their own blood and have to bleed for efforts that he's commanding them to do, that he wants to make sure that he's giving as much as he can. And we get to see Petra support that, or not support, but refute that a little bit, but also be there to assist him, and does show off that she has her yang magic, which was originally revealed in one of the side stories that I think my copy of the translations included that next section, but yours might not have. But like the last one of them that is translated does show that she has, that Roswell had been teaching her yang magic.
She's next here, or what?
She's a lot of the yang magic is like buffs compared to Subaru's yin magic being debuffs. Yes, so she's just making Otto able to use his divine protection more easily.
What she's doing is she's empowering his body, she's empowering his brain, like making his brain work better.
I mean, that's interesting. We've never really seen that style of thing, you know what I mean? Like, just by using my affinity to you, I am like, I'm using my affinity of... only thing that we've seen is with water, which is healing, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if there's still a way that you can be like, here's my affinity of earth in order to protect your body or whatever, or like reinforce your body, because like, what is it, wind, things outside of you, earth is your body.
Well, earth, we do see Garfield use it.
Yeah, that's his divine protection too.
But it is still connected to that magic.
We see Peace use earth magic to defend himself too. It's wind is like the ultimate offensive magic, right? Where there's no... It's really hard to make it useful in a miscellaneous sense, but its offensive power is really strong.
As far as we can tell. Yeah. But we see like the yin magic be used both as an attack and as an effect on the world. That is with the
genius of Beatrice implementing it, though.
True, but it says at a point that so far we only see yang magic as an offensive force with the laser beam and the yang sword. That it's nice to see this is how you're supposed to use it. We technically see that with Roswell using it to fly, but beyond that,
but he's doing that by combining different elements, right?
And one of the things is that that's something I was kind of noticing too, that yang we're talking about light yang, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just making sure I didn't say the wrong one. Basically, like, the idea is that they're supposed to be buffing, but we haven't really seen that much. I mean, like, I know that it's a rare magical element, but I hope that we do see more interesting Yang buffs.
Yeah.
Yep, I was like very excited to see that Petra had that shown here.
It makes so much sense for her character to be Yang too.
It really does.
Yeah, it's great. Petra really shines in this phase. So does Otto. Like, as you were saying, like, his idea of, like, people are shedding blood, so I must shed as much blood as they do in my own way, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a wholesome and really, like, heroic moment, I feel. It's just...
Yeah.
Man, the Amelia camp is the best, and I'm so glad they're back.
The last little tiny thing I wanted to talk about, just briefly before we move on to the other big stuff, is addressing the gluttonous elephant in the room of everyone's discussion involving Louis when that gets revealed to everyone. Like, do you think everyone's like reactions were fair? Should she have survived this? Or do you think everyone would have been in their rights to have taken her out?
I think everyone would have been, like, from their perspective, would have been justified in taking her out, but it doesn't feel, like, wrong or badly written that she survives, because the explanation for it makes sense to me.
Well, you know what's weird about it? It's also the fact that I know that people have probably heard from all time, just like the witch's backstory, that Senator bishops are these awful, cruel people, right? But until recently, right, like, no people really experienced what they're like, right? So, especially in, like, Wallachia, the only time it was enshrined, now is your own emperor, and that's kind of, like, the entire thing. But, like, the idea is that, like, their influence doesn't make them any less human. For example, we see, like, a lot of these people, I don't know if they understand this quite yet, or perhaps they're intuiting it, but they literally have two people in their camp that also has authority. So it's like their perception that it's immediately evil. I mean, of course, I understand why the Amelia camp thinks she's immediately evil and stuff like that, but, like, the idea is, and the reason why they have the same perspective that Subaru has, because they trust him and stuff.
Yeah, Beatrice has fought Louis before.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But also the reason why Beatrice at the end here is okay with Louis is because of her connection to her mother, a witch, right?
Mm-hmm. And her faith in Subaru's beliefs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but that's, like, from a point of understanding, that's why she's there to allay the Amelia camp.
So I know you have a bit of spoilers on this, Gold, so I'll ask you, Wolf, on where do you think Louis' place is going forward now that she's with, like, the main camp?
Place in what sense? What do you mean by that?
Like, is she the next Meline or Garfield, where it's like a former foe turned ally for the camp permanently? Like, is she with the Amelia camp for the rest of this, or is she going to get locked in the capital or not survive the arcs? Where do you think Louis is going?
My two predictions are, and this is really sad because I'm loving her as a character, my concerns are that she is either going to regain what made her the Louis of before, and then she becomes an opponent again, which will be a really distressing moment for Subaru, and she lashes out and, like, does something really bad to one of the people Subaru's really close to, or she dies in this arc or the next, and that the whole feeling of that is it's a tragedy, a point of loss for Subaru, right? Because I think those can both work. Because ultimately, I think Louis is set up for tragedy. I don't know if if my feeling on that is right, but I don't think she's going to be a permanent ally for the rest of the series, in the sense that I don't think she'll be around for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. One thing that I kind of thought about this is that you're right. I think this arc in particular kind of informs something, which is that there is going to be a theme throughout the story, people re-becoming who they are. And so far, Tappei has shown that with Rem, that there is going to be a process in which I think, like, the only thing that's right, and this might seem weird, is if Louis eventually remembers the fear and that she was like Yorna, you know, like the gluttony Yorna. At some point,
learning that she used to be horrific.
Yes, she has to learn that, and she has to confront it in the same way, right? Maybe in the same way Louis confronted Shadow Subaru and stuff like that, or confronted Subaru at the end. But instead, it's just her with herself. But I also think that you saying that she will probably have to meet a fate by the end of the story, I agree with in a larger sense. But there's one thing that we talked about, I think, last week that made me kind of hesitate to say that with certainty. I used to be able to say it with certainty, right? Because of the themes of the story with being like a sage and whatnot, and having to have Subaru have all the gluttonies. But in the same way in which the Witch of Envy has to, use, like, is able to give him the gluttony power. I wonder if, in the same way of the backpacking little girl that Beatrice is, that she'll be able to confer that power to Subaru.
That's the only way I could see her being a permanent ally. I say this as a worry, not in the sense of like a writing sense, but as I care for the Louis we have now, right?
She's adorable.
I think that's too convenient for Tappei. I could genuinely see him taking her from us.
But he's a little girl user.
I was going to say exactly girl, but that just makes him little girl user twofold.
That is true. That would also work. You see what I'm saying? Of like, I could see it going either way, justifiably.
Yeah,
but
I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love Louis though. She has been such a surprise addition to this arc and the story in whole, and a really, really cool accent to the color of Subaru's character, of how he's learning the world is more sophisticated, right? And therefore his opinions on Louis are becoming more sophisticated. It's so good, man!
But this character has no growth, so who cares? Subaru doesn't develop as a character. He's kind of annoying.
He always regresses.
For no reason.
Cry? Man, why does he regress so much in this arc? I'm getting tired of this, man. No, I'm not. This is how people actually change.
Why is he so anxious all the time, or like so like annoying? Like, main characters should not be annoying. It's bad writing.
Why? Like, I remember I read a comment recently on someone's video on season 3 episode 1, and someone was like, "Man, I dislike Subaru. He always talks like a main character, or he always talks like he's always annoying to me." I'm just like, one, he is a main character, and two, like he's not talking as if he's a main character. He is someone that is genuinely a person like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, he will always reach out, he'll always be empathetic, and he'll always stand up for what he thinks is right, but with a nuanced human look.
Of course. Let's also not get too far off of the phase.
The topic itself. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. I just wanted to address Louis real quick, because she's not super featured in this phase, but is enough to warrant a brief bit of discussion.
She's always enough.
The last part of this main battle that we should address is Amelia versus Meline here, right?
Woo! Yes! I like that we get a rematch here.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really fun extension of what we saw in the previous phase. And can I just say, I love Amelia so much. Like, Tappei has gotten so much, maybe not even better at writing her. Tappei has actualized her up until this point of, I know what Amelia's thing is, right? Like, I know what she stands for. I know what she's fighting for. I know what she's aiming to become. And I cannot help but always root for her in every situation. She's just the goddamn best. Like, it
is hard to ever root against her.
She's so sweet, and she tries so hard. Like, her interactions with Priscilla this phase,
they're really funny.
They're so funny, and it's the thing of, like, she really wants to be friends with Priscilla, and Priscilla is being tsundere about it, but it's kind of playing along with it, and it's so cute. But
they're destined rivals.
Yeah. And I love that Amelia is coming out of her shell. She's coming into her own, and she's doing that with the help of Subaru. And that's her ice brand arts of, like, Subaru are the people that are the things that assist her the most in this fight. Right?
Yes, but just on the ice, I love her Subaru statues. Don't get me wrong. I think I laughed and thought that was amazing. It is a little messed up that her new attack is just sending a bunch of Subaru clones to get killed.
That is perfect.
I think that's on the part of Tappei being a little fucker.
It is. It's a little on the nose, but it's really funny too, because she has no idea that's what he does. Only that Subaru is at her side helping her, so she makes it real.
It's a thing of, like, man, Subaru would do this for her because he's actually doing this, right?
Yeah, he really does.
Yeah, and I love that the idea of Subaru himself is not only a comforting thing for Amelia, but also a thing that drives her forward, that pushes her forward, because they've become that for each other. Whenever Subaru's in a tough position, he's always like, what would Amelia do? Like, what... he holds his moral standards to her, and she holds her own to his. It's a really beautiful thing. And
Subaru holds moral standards to Amelia, but Amelia holds like self standards to Subaru.
Yeah, but they are related. But like for Amelia in particular, I'm at this point. I was doubtful before. I thought maybe there was potential for other things to go other way. Amelia's falling in love with Subaru. It's so obvious. Like, especially
She's here wanting to tell him something.
She doesn't understand what it is, but she has fallen in love with Subaru, and it is adorable. Like, she is so heartstruck, and it's just so cute.
I just want to point out real quick, it's amazing how throughout this podcast you can see our opinions of certain characters slowly change and realize how ignorant we were at some of our takes earlier. Like, I remember all of us were kind of like, I don't know if Amelia will go with Subaru by the end of the series. That seems a little bit weird. And then we're like,
still have my hesitations because every so often we get a thing with Tappei going a little bit too far with the dunderhead Amelia, like not knowing what a divine general is, or missing some really obvious stuff. Petra being more intelligent in planning, oftentimes not trusting her to have a real alias, that she has to just be Amelie instead of Amelia.
Mealy.
Yeah, they write it as Emily, but it's because it's Amelia, and you just take out the and it's Amelie, because if she stops herself, then that's what she's going to say.
That's funny.
And that's fair enough as like criticisms of her character, but it's one of those things where for me it's becoming less of a problem and more of an endearment.
It is. It just sometimes I feel like it's regressing the character progression rather than having the character go through regression that Subaru does. It's,
that
like it's like Tappei is going back on what he has had Amelia grow through.
Well, I think that, as the story grows longer and longer, not only is getting better writing these characters, but I think the more that Subaru gets fleshed out, the less amount of time he has to do things through his perspective, so he can give more of that development to other characters.
Yeah, like I love when we are in Amelia's perspective, because I feel like she's almost a different person than when we are in Subaru's or like Garfield or Otto's perspective of her.
I would describe her as dazzling, almost. Like the way she sees the world is beautiful.
It is. Like I would follow her, and I can see her being a heroine of her own. I don't like her as much when she is the object of like pure naive innocence that most of the Amelia camp sees, or the object of perfection that Subaru sees. So I prefer her character when we are in her perspective. That's my only soapbox matter, because like I had obviously read all this when we started the podcast like, this point. It's like I knew where she was going, and I still had a couple gripes. But you all, I'm happy that she has grown as much for you, because she is really great here.
And you know what? This fight with Meline, I do feel bad for Meline throughout this. I do think she's in an untenable position in which she is the only left. I mean, obviously, we're talking about the juxtaposition of doing something out of love and doing something out of hatred. This is the clash between both Amelia and Meline here, because Madeline's doing it because she wants revenge. That's all she really cares about. Killing the person who killed her, her beloved. And the, fight here is very obvious. Like we established earlier that she's weak to ice. That is what she's fighting with. I think Amelia's empathy here does shine through pretty well. She recognized a lot of Madeline's thing, and obviously has been thinking about their last fight. So this feels like the perfect, thing that she's like, nope, I am going to stop you here. No more running away. We have to solve this here and now,
Yep, just gonna hit. It's really not on the nose, but almost poetic that she has to take the more direct approach here and decides to switch from everything else she's using to just a giant hammer.
Yeah, exactly. It's very funny. I mean, her magic, her magic being so strong but also so simple is one of the more subtle ways of writing her naivete that I think works, which is just like, she's not a grand mage because she's, cunning. She's a grand mage because she's a witch, And
Yeah, she
that's
has
sort of
a ridiculous level of power. She has changed the entire weather of the battlefield to the degree that everyone is starting to shiver and going numb from how much colder it is.
Almost everyone in Wallachia has never even seen snow before.
No, it's a genius strategy move. Like, good job, Otto. It's brilliant. But damn, that is a scary level of power.
Yeah, she can literally change the weather.
It's a good thing that she's such a good person and wields it well, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's the idea that witches are these unfathomable existences with this grand amount of power, but she herself, the Witch of Frost, is actually just a kind-hearted woman who wants to thaw people's, frozen hearts rather than freeze them forever,
Yeah. Because ultimately her power is fire magic, which will undo the ice at some point.
Yeah. I mean, the snow will always melt away, no matter what.
Yeah, the snow, everything will thaw eventually. And Amelia just does such a good job.
In a way,
it is.
Because that's what she herself forged, right? Like,
and that's her ultimate goal, is thawing out everyone that she froze initially. Like, that's still why she's here.
Reinhard and Astrea's stuff, like everyone around her, she's got to make things better. And she's great. And I really admire her for that. Because even if a lot of the time she's naive or she doesn't always think things fully through, I would always admire that Amelia tries her best to help others, regardless of context. Like, she's empathetic to Meline, despite having a very intense battle with her, where her life was at risk at many points.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she jumped ahead of, like, everyone else in her camp when they saw that the flying dragons were attacking Guarl, and is here taking on their... Despite her low ranking in the Divine General list, Meline and her ability to control Mazoria and the flying dragons, as Serena describes, that she has this ability to control them, which almost makes her job as the leader of the Flying Dragon Squadron useless.
Exactly.
She's a terrifying threat.
The thing is with Meline is that she's not 9 because of her power. She's 9 because she's new. Nobody really knows too much about her, And the idea, and it's a replacement, obviously, but like the idea is that she could be just as strong as or stronger than most of the Divine Generals, but it's just like, obviously she's a bad matchup for Amelia in this scenario.
She also hasn't grown into into a woman yet fully, right? Like, she's a distressed and emotional child.
That's at least how she's presented. But
I know, didn't the last chapter she was like older, like she's something. So I think she literally said in the chapter with Hainel that she's like a full-grown woman and she's like 40 something. I don't know. She said something like that.
I'm almost positive that she is an adult. She was in an arranged marriage at some point. But I mean, Ryuzu is an adult that is in a child's body, whereas Beatrice is an eternal child. So there is a difference between like what they do there.
Yeah, Dragonkin are weird, and who knows? I mean, that's the thing, right? She knows all about the lore of her clan and whatnot, and she was obviously hidden away for a long time, even though they've been dead for a long time. These are just things. Like, for example, like one of the master smiths that smithed all of the weapons were, like the legendary weapons, was the Dragonkin. So something tells me is that they either live a long time because the rest of the race went extinct that long ago, or who knows? Long-lived races isn't new to the story.
No.
Yeah.
So, but she still acts immature here and is like throwing basically a temper tantrum about how dare you defy this dragon, friggin' die.
Yeah, I love the way her dialogue is so much fun to read.
You friggin' fricks, when will you learn?
How dare you to fight this dragon? Just lay down and die in front of me.
I can't,
but she called the big one in at the end. Like, this is a capital D dragon, Mazoria the Cloud Dragon.
The design is so good here.
Oh my god. Capital D Dragon again, man. Tappei is sprinkling in so many fun world building stuff in each of these phases building up. I'm just like, when we go back to Lagunica eventually, I hope he's got more stuff to show us of Lagunica, Because
it looks bad in comparison.
Because we learned so much about the culture and the way people understand things in Wallachia, and even small folk tales and ideas of what they think about individual concepts. So I hope we get to see more of that from Lagunica, because oh my god, Tappei is really good at this shit. Like I could tell.
You can tell he started playing D&D when he was writing this.
He's playing D&D. He's playing some sort of tabletop, and he's like fully in his world building era, and I love it. How do we deal with this though? Because I know we suggested, Heinkel's got to slay a dragon, right? But is the solution slaying the dragon?
Please, it took Priscilla and Amelia both to stop one attack from Mizoria, and both of them could destroy Heinkel with literally a flick of... Yeah. I mean, Priscilla does KO Heinkel with a flick of her wrist.
Yeah.
He's not at the ability to fight Mizoria, the Cloud Dragon. This still has to be... Like, they've got Amelia there. Roswell might be on his way. The timing for when he's talking to Serena is unclear.
And this is just practice for him killing the other dragon.
Oh my god, that would be a very Roswell fucking thing to do.
Does he need to kill the Volcanica if they kill Mizoria?
Different dragon, yeah. Cause it's
yeah, exactly. But you know what's interesting about this? It's entirely bewildering that Mizoria exists and is here, like physically. Mm-hmm. Like we have to figure this out. Like it's something that we're gonna figure out. But what Madeline's been up to, obviously.
Yeah,
but
I feel
it's
like me and Gold are going to be losing our minds for the next couple chapters in the next phase. And like, what you existing in itself is crazy. What's going on here?
It's a lot. I'm really happy with where it goes and like what we can learn from it, because it just brings even bigger and more interesting questions after that. But this whole fight with Mizoria and Amelia, like this is clearly going to be like the major conflict. We also see the next Divine General had shown up against Heinkel, and that at some point a giant blast had come from the palace.
Yes,
that had to be stopped with a certain everyone's favorite little spirit girl.
Yeah, interesting enough, that blast is so like. That blast from the capital is like they said it's something about bringing about a calamity. Is that what it said?
Yeah, so like many years ago, it helped prevent a great disaster. Like, in that vein of like, was this ancient technology that was used to like fight back Satella when she was consuming the world, or
ancient magic? I wonder if that's the reason why. Maybe that you're right. Maybe this is what defeated Volcanica originally. Maybe this is what defeated whatever. Like, who knows? Like this, on aid with whatever happened during the Calamity period.
And
who knows? Maybe it's
have anything to do with Echidna, because it's described the way it's described. It's basically a giant meteor.
Yes, yeah. The source of the blast is a giant meteor.
Because it's all even the palace itself is just made out of like enhanced and special magic stones. It's described as.
That's at least it seems similar to that.
So this is really cool, and it powers up. It's ready to take out Zakir, who is a badass by the way. Like
Zakir. It's like fucking. I would follow him to battle. Let's go.
I would follow Zakir until my body turned to dust, man. He is the coward. He is the guy. Like, I love
I'm definitely not expecting a Beatrice paralleling Zakir Osman with the people who left all this time. That's very funny to me, but it's also just showing her empathy and how it's grown, her willing to act.
Well, because she even thinks about how she regrets not being there for Subaru and helping him more in before Arc 4, because she thinks like, oh, if I was there, could it have been different? Could have Subaru lost less? It's a really cool introspective moment of her character that we haven't seen from her yet, right? And it's wonderful, like her characterization, and the fact she remembers Subaru getting knighted and then does a similar thing to Zakir as like her favor to him, and he like all of the girls in the tent he gets his favor from. Zakir's great. I love Zakir.
Zakir is amazing. I imagine that when he's leading troops in battle, it's like the scene in Mulan where they're all singing about the girl that they have, the girl that they're fighting for. And Zakir would just be singing about all of them. He just wants all women in the world to be amazing. And I'm very happy he gets to be knighted by the best little girl in the series.
Because he's a soldier of Vollachian, but now he's a knight of Beatrice.
Look, there are some great women in the Amelia camp, Zakir, if you ever want to take a vacation in Lagunica for a couple of years.
And by vacation, I mean, like, we can recruit you. You're the best dude. Come on.
Yeah. Frederica could use a proper match.
A good man.
Lots of hair on both sides.
Yeah. This is very funny because it's like, I think that you're right. In a way, this arc is recruiting more allies for the Amelia camp in the future, because obviously this is mostly the Amelia camp, also the Priscilla camp. But
I have a feeling that Subaru's army, like there's going to be some carryover. Like he has to have like a.
I mean, if you aren't expecting the 3 Amiibros from the Gladiator Island not to follow Subaru back to Lagunica, I don't. How could anything else happen?
Subaru from hell and back at this point, like genuinely.
They have. They left the Gladiator Island where they're all cursed to die if they leave with him.
They all died for him. They don't know that, but they did.
True. And he has died for them many times.
And it's like a, you know how in a lot of those like military movies, it's like that beautiful moment of like true love of loyalty between a good commander and his soldiers. We're going to get that with Subaru and his men, and he's going to care for every single one of them. And Subaru, as a leader of people, he's going to grow a lot, and it's going to be a really very, very satisfying moment. I can already tell. They're probably going to come back to Lagunica with him. It's going to be a great time, you know, y'all, until it goes wrong.
I cannot wait till you see what their setup and relationship is in this next phase.
I'm so excited, dude.
Yeah.
Do you know what? In topic of like Subaru, while we mentioned here, like it's really cool that Tappei set up that he was here by offhandedly mentioning, they've captured a load of Natsuki Schwartzes. We don't know which is which, and as soon as I heard that, I was like, "Oh, Subaru's plotting." Yes.
I don't think that was Subaru's plot. I don't actually remember if this is something that he says later, but at least at this point, I remember thinking that this was just a bunch of other groups who took the chance to rebel by putting their own little black-haired boy in charge.
Most of them were. What I thought was Subaru had snuck in with that group, right? As his cover to go in. And then he was using that as his ability to... Because he doesn't know that all of his friends are coming to fight. He's fighting on his own with his men. That's his assumption, right?
Yeah, their goal was, we're just going to go and attack the capital ourselves.
Well, no, he's going to rescue Rem right now. That's his plan, right?
He didn't know that Rem is in the capital.
He didn't... Oh, that's...
They're attacking the capital because Subaru fucking hates Vollachian.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, he doesn't even know that she's captured.
Oh my god!
They're literally here just because he's holding a giant middle finger to the Empire.
Phase? Let's fuck up your shitty dad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And come on, everyone, help me! We're gonna burn this country to the ground.
Like, it's a good thing that Abel and Ishmael and every other rebel army and Amelia are all attacking at the same time, because he'd be screwed otherwise. They're not the main party here, you know? Like, this isn't the main... the army over the hills, like Lord of the Rings, hasn't arrived there yet. One thing that's really interesting in that vein, I guess, is that in that idea, like, Subaru... Because we get this from Roswell's perspective of, I've got to help Subaru so he has as little attempts as possible. Roswell's thinking about how Subaru is setting the Empire ablaze, and he thinks that's very out of character for him, but also in character at the same time. And it's interesting that Subaru's just like, man, I hate this place so fucking much that I'm going to get together this band of outcasts that have been mistreated and oppressed, and we're going to fix this shit by burning it to ash. And in a way, I think that's his way of saying fuck you to Abel in his mind, right? Because he doesn't know what Abel wants with that. Yeah. He doesn't. But more than anything, I'm just happy to have Subaru back. And but right before that happens, though, we get what was almost the most heartbreaking scene in the entire series with Betty.
Betty sacrificing herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where this beam is charging up, and she thinks of her empathy of Zakir, and she thinks about what Subaru would do in her situation. You know, she's always thinking... Subaru has helped her open her heart to other people and to empathize with others. And in that moment, she thinks, Subaru wouldn't let these people die, right? And she decides to use, my assumption is, every part of her being, basically, to cast this Alshamark, to cut off this beam from killing the great and mighty Zakir Osman. And you can't forget Jamal! Because he's killing people and dragons, and he's great. I just had to mention him because you can't go an episode without mentioning Jamal.
No, yeah. Jamal, best man, on his way to save his sister who he genuinely loves, with real loyalty to good people. Jamal might be a horrible asshole and a fighting soldier, but damn if his heart not in the right place.
Exactly. Until we get a tragic moment where Todd kills him in front of Katya, and I cry. because that's
I
gonna
thought
happen.
you said you didn't have any more spoilers, Wolf. Jeez.
Don't shock me like that, Connor. Fuck, that sent chills down my spine. Oh god. Okay, yeah. But we have this beautiful moment where Beatrice thinks about how, what should Subaru do in this moment? I'm going to sacrifice myself. I'm going to cast this Alchemark with everything of my being, and she starts to disappear into the sky as Louis has teleported her up there to help. And we get probably the most satisfying moment in the series, like ever. Like,
it's
so relieving and cathartic.
The first time he's had a heroic entrance.
The way it seems is like Louis senses something, or she sees something, and she starts teleporting and moving as Beatrice is fading into motes of light, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we just get the dialogue of, we get a little bit of banter, and Subaru's just like, yeah, I love you too. They're back together!
Finally, oh my god. And it's been so long
the worst
since
thing
they
for
had
me
been
is
together.
Too, right? Like, I in the back of my mind this entire time I'm thinking, Subaru's going to blow up soon, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, when you really think about it, ever since Arc 5, really, they've been, around middle of Arc 6, they've been sort of separated by circumstance, Like, they've been sort of in this weird, fritzy area in which it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, obviously, Subaru wasn't really Subaru for a lot of Arc 6. Like, this sort of perception of they haven't had this amazing dynamic in technically like almost 2 arcs at this point. So seeing it come back to fruition is very exciting because they're whole when they're both together. So
yeah, they really are, and it's just such a relief to not only just for these two to be back together, but for Subaru to finally have like a real genuine ally and a friend, someone that he knows, a point of comfort and security and safety back with him, and he gets to be the one that saves her here.
Yes, and it's such an awesome, and it's a moment where I almost like tear up thinking about it, right?
I did tear up when it happened because I was literally crying tears of joy. I didn't think that Subaru would rejoin with the Amelia camp before the arc ended.
Yeah, neither did I. Although, in that vein, I don't know, will he join with the whole camp, or will it just be Beatrice with him for a little bit? Are they going to truly be able to fully unite after this?
I had known that Beatrice was enough for me to get through the rest. Even if he didn't meet everyone else till Arc 8 ended, if he had Betty, I was happy.
No, I agree on that point. But I'm also, an extension of that, my worry is, because I know how Tappei is, he's given Subaru this concession of giving Betty back. What's going to happen next for Subaru? What's he going to punish Subaru for getting this 1 W for,
Not even one. He has Betty and Louis now at the same time.
Yeah, he's got the little girl user has got his 2 most powerful little girls.
It's one of those things.
And oh my god, yeah,
that's funny. But also, I think about the very funny part about this is that not only that image of just like a little boy surrounded by 3 little girls, and they're about to destroy entire empire, but also. By the end, you're talking about like something's going to happen. You know that the next phase is the last of Arc 7, right? So the shoe is going to drop. The shoe is going to drop in a big way.
It's a long phase, though, right?
Not much longer than this one.
Okay.
Like it goes just as fast.
I have a feeling we'll learn what Subaru's up to. Like, what's he been doing? What are him and his boys doing? Can't forget the boys.
Yeah, it was mentioned that there was another like rebel army attacking, right?
Yep.
So like that's like the inference here at the end.
Loads of different rebel armies attacking, right? So,
but it's great. I'm so happy that they're back. Like we kind of briefly have gone over that Roswell and Rom like had a cool stuff with Serena as we've been talking. We kind of hit all the little points. It was nice to see some extra stuff about Roswell, like that he was engaged to her at some point. Which
is strange.
Cool.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
Like a genuinely good match.
Yeah, it's a political marriage too.
Political marriage, and also a thing of like she seems to have a great bloodline. So if he was to have a kid, to have another Roswell generation, if he needed it, they would be strong. Right? Is the point?
Yeah. Imagine Roswell M. Mathers is a dragon rider.
I would cry.
It's terrifying.
The man is literally a one-man army already.
Yeah, he talks about how his power to fly in the sky and rain down fire is similar to her leading the Dragon Squadron and raining fire from the sky. It's equal measure.
He's Lagunica's Air Force in one man.
Okay, but what happens if he gets to Roswell's Z-Mathers? Does he have to start saying A1, A2, I mean? Does he have to start going back around?
Probably. I mean, he could start going like hex code at that point.
Well, doesn't he also want this to be his last Roswell, right? Like, that's part of the point. Like, he
doesn't want... He's ready to take Anna Rose if he has to, but he doesn't want to.
No.
Like, he likes Anna Rose and Petra a lot.
Yeah, exactly. He has affection for Petra as a teacher, and he loves Anna Rose's family, for sure.
He probably won't get a better chance than when Subaru is alive either. At this point to get it.
Anna Rose is his only viable option at this point.
But so that's the phase. Overall, it seems like we really liked it. This is, I think, my favorite phase in the arc, honestly, which is amazing because Subaru is barely in it.
Yeah, but this it's a showing of how Tappei has improved as a writer, how the story itself is improving as we go along. Like, I enjoyed this phase so much. It hit so many different emotional points for me, and then theorizing and like world-building stuff, it hit that for me too. There were so many cool character moments. I can't believe Hainel was in my top 5 now. Tappei made me think Hainel was in my top 5. Like, that should tell you how good this phase is.
Hainel is just going to keep earning W's from the readers. Is all it's pretty much what I can say for that.
Yeah. All I'll say is, if this arc ever does get animated, I can't wait to see the anime-onlys that hate the Hainel of Season 3 absolutely adore the Hainel of Season 5 or 4, whatever.
100%. But any other final thoughts for the phase, guys?
Great one.
No.
It's just a great one.
This was just great. This was amazing. I don't have much more to say. I'm kind of speechless at this point. I enjoyed it so much.
And I'm excited to see how this wraps up.
Yeah, like what is the climax of this arc? How does it lead into Arc 8? I'm curious to see. I also want to learn more about Subaru's army. Like, what's going on with that? I'm curious. Do we get to see any more Amelia Camp reunite with Subaru? Do we get to see any characters that Subaru knows reunite with him? I'm curious. I also want to know.
And how will Otto and Petra escape their doom?
Yeah, because Todd is there to ruin their lives. And one last thing I'll mention is, what the hell is going on with Vincent and Abel? Okay, like, there's so many possible ideas in my brain of what's going on that I can't like mention loads, but like there are points where I'm like, is Abel the real Vincent, or is Vincent the real Vincent and Abel is Chisha on a mission from Vincent? I'm thinking to that level at this point, man. I have no clue.
5D chess.
Yeah, like, it's Tappei is cooking something with Vincent Abelux is all I'll say.
True. So we'll have to see how that progresses in the last phase of Arc 7 as we wrap up Arc 7 finale next time.
We've done it, guys. We're close.
Yep, and then we'll have a few episodes of EX novels between.
Yeah, we'll have a bit of a break, side stories, EX content. We'll have EX1 with Kyle's, which is exciting because that is our best episode to date that we lost.
It's so good. It's such a good book.
Tragic loss.
The tragic loss. Never forget.
But we will get to all fawn over Kyle's freaking out over how great Fourier is, I hope.
Yes! I cannot wait.
Yeah, we just have to mention every thing that we mentioned last time.
I think we can do a good job of doing that. But yeah, I hope everyone watching up until this point, you have a nice day or evening wherever you are. Tell us what you think in the comments. Like the video if you like it. Tell us where we're wrong in the comments if you think we're wrong. Tell us how you feel. And share the video to friends if you think they find it interesting. Apart from that, goodbye!
Bye!
Bye!